The year is 1638, and the mighty fleet of the Dutch East India Company sails into the Indian Ocean, carrying valuable spices like nutmeg and mace. The ships would soon make port in Europe, delivering exotic goods to eager customers across the continent. Over the course of the next half-century, the Dutch would go on to conquer large parts of Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and even India, building one of the largest navies in the world and creating the first multinational corporation in history. So how did the Dutch become such a powerful colonial force in Asia? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. The so-called Dutch Golden Age was a period in the 17th century when the Netherlands was a preeminent global naval and trading power. As the United Provinces, the Dutch sent out explorers to search for new trade routes to Asia, where they could purchase precious commodities such as cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. After sailing around Africa, the Dutch realized that they could make huge profits by selling these spices in Europe. But they soon found fierce competition from the Portuguese, who had established a strong presence in the region. Determined to break the Portuguese monopoly, the Dutch allied with local rulers and set up their own settlements. This led to conflict with the Portuguese and other European powers. But the Dutch were able to hold their own due to their powerful navy. Eventually, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was formed in 1602 to oversee and monopolize Dutch trade with Asia. With the backing of the Dutch government, the VOC grew to become a powerful force in the region. It developed into a ruthless trading machine that amassed great wealth and expanded Dutch influence throughout Asia. But how exactly did the VOC function? Well, it functioned in a way similar to our modern-day corporations. The company was run by a board of directors who appointed a governor-general. To oversee its operations in Asia, the VOC had the power to issue its own currency, mint coins, and even raise taxes. It also had its own military force, which was used to protect its trading posts and enforce its dominance in the region. Now, initially, the VOC focused on trade and didn't have any interest in establishing large colonies. However, as the company grew in power, it started to take an interest in acquiring territory. This was mainly for strategic reasons, such as having a base to support its naval operations or having access to local resources. For example, the Dutch took an interest in the Banda Islands, after they discovered that they produced the valuable spice nutmeg. The VOC then used its military force to subdue the local population and establish a plantation economy. This was a common tactic used by the Dutch throughout their colonial career. They would ally with local rulers, often of rival kingdoms, to gain access to resources or strategic locations. They would then use this access to build up their own power base, from which they could control the region. Now, you may be wondering why the Dutch chose to settle in places like Indonesia rather than other parts of Asia. Well, there are a few reasons for this. Firstly, the Dutch were mainly interested in spices, which were in high demand in Europe. And at the time, Indonesia was one of the only places where these spices could be found. Secondly, the Dutch were more attracted to the idea of controlling trade routes rather than acquiring territory. This meant that they were more likely to establish settlements in places like Ceylon, where they could control the flow of goods through the Indian Ocean rather than further inland. Finally, the Dutch were more interested in Asia than other parts of the world, because of the potential for profit. The Dutch saw Asia as a land of great wealth and opportunity, and believed that they could make a fortune by trading there. By the mid-17th century, the Dutch had taken control of key ports throughout Asia, including those in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and India. From here, they dominated the spice trade and built vast fortunes. However, their dominance would not last forever, as the Portuguese eventually took back control of Goa. And the British and French began to challenge the Dutch in the region. But that, as they say, is a story for another time.